Welcome to a story of love, betrayal, and the ultimate test of commitment. Evelyn and Mark seem to have it all, a perfect marriage built on trust and understanding. But when Evelyn's secret affair with her charming coworker Ben comes to light, their world is turned upside down. Anonymous emails, shocking revelations, and the interference of a trusted friend push their relationship to the brink. With emotions running high and forgiveness seeming impossible, will they find a way to rebuild their shattered bond, or will the damage prove too much to repair? Stay tuned as we dive into this gripping tale of trust, love, and redemption. It's 2015. The world feels like it's on the brink of something new, with smartphones and social media reshaping how people connect. But for one small suburban neighborhood in Vermont, life still has that quiet, old-fashioned charm: tree-lined streets, cozy coffee shops, and neighbors who actually know each other's names. This is where our story begins. Meet Evelyn, or Evie, as everyone calls her. At 34, she's the picture of a life well put together. She's got the kind of charm that makes people feel comfortable, whether it's her coworkers at the small marketing firm where she works, or the barista who knows her latte order by heart. Married to her high school sweetheart, Mark, their life together seems straight out of a Hallmark movie. Mark, 36, is a steady presence. A teacher at the local high school, he's beloved by students and colleagues alike. He's not flashy, but that's part of his appeal. Mark's the guy who shows up, whether it's for a late-night parent-teacher conference or to help a neighbor fix a leaky pipe. Together, Mark and Evelyn have built what looks like a perfect life: a comfortable home, matching coffee mugs in the kitchen, and a shared playlist of their favorite songs. But of course, perfection is just an illusion. The cracks in their picture-perfect marriage are subtle at first, so subtle that even Evelyn doesn't notice them right away. Mark's been pulling longer hours at work, and Evelyn's calendar is packed with work deadlines and weekend yoga classes. They still have date nights, but the spark that once made their connection electric now feels like a flickering candle in a drafty room. Enter Ben, a charismatic newcomer in Evelyn's office. At 29, Ben is the kind of guy who turns heads without even trying. He's got a sharp wit and a natural charm that make meetings a little more fun and coffee breaks a lot more interesting. He's single, or at least that's what he tells everyone, and he has a knack for making people feel seen, especially Evelyn. The story really kicks off one crisp October morning. Evelyn's racing through the office, her hands full of folders, when she collides, literally, with Ben near the copier. Papers fly everywhere, and they both laugh as they scramble to pick them up. "Sorry about that," Ben says, flashing a grin that feels a little too warm. "Guess I'm not as smooth as I think I am." Evelyn smiles back, brushing her hair out of her face. "It's fine Mondays, right?" Their exchange is short, but something about it lingers. It's not the words. They're perfectly innocent. But the way Ben looks at her, like she's the only person in the room, for a woman who's spent the past few years feeling invisible in her own life, it's intoxicating. Over the next few weeks, Evelyn finds herself looking forward to her interactions with Ben. It's harmless, she tells herself. They're just coworkers. But there's something undeniably thrilling about the way he makes her laugh, the way his gaze lingers a little too long. It's like a spark she hasn't felt in years, and she's not sure she wants to put it out. Mark, meanwhile, is oblivious. He's been preoccupied with an upcoming school event, pouring his energy into planning a fundraiser for the new gym equipment. Evelyn supports him, of course, but there's a growing distance between them, one that neither of them seems to know how to bridge. Then comes the first real turning point. It's a Friday afternoon, and the office is buzzing with that pre-weekend energy. Ben invites Evelyn to grab a drink with a few colleagues at a nearby bar. She hesitates at first. Mark is expecting her home for dinner, but the idea of unwinding after a long week is too tempting to pass up. The bar is cozy and dimly lit, with music playing just loud enough to make conversation feel intimate. Evelyn sips her wine, laughing at Ben's stories, feeling more like herself than she has in months. When the group starts to dwindle, Ben doesn't leave. Instead, he slides his chair a little closer, lowering his voice as he asks, "What's someone like you doing in a place like this?" It's cheesy, but Evelyn laughs anyway, feeling the warmth of his attention settle over her like a soft blanket. For the first time, she wonders if there might be something dangerous about this connection. The night ends with a lingering goodbye outside the bar. Ben doesn't try anything. No inappropriate gestures, no whispered confessions, but his smile as he walks away feels like a promise. Evelyn watches him go, her heart pounding in a way that both excites and terrifies her. When she gets home, Mark is already asleep on the couch, a half-empty beer bottle on the coffee table. The sight of him, so familiar, so safe, should comfort her, but instead, it makes her feel like she's standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into the abyss. The weekend passes in a blur of errands and small talk, but Evelyn can't stop thinking about Ben. She starts noticing little things, how she checks her phone more often, hoping for a message from him, or how she puts a little extra effort into her appearance before work. It's not cheating, she tells herself. It's just a distraction. But distractions have a way of becoming something more. By Monday, Evelyn feels like a teenager with a crush. She's both thrilled and horrified by her own behavior, oscillating between guilt and excitement. When Ben stops by her desk to say good morning, her heart skips a beat. Their conversations become more frequent, their jokes more personal, and though neither of them says it out loud, there's an unspoken understanding building between them. Still, Evelyn tells herself she's in control. She loves Mark, doesn't she? Their marriage might be in a rut, but that doesn't mean she'd ever cross the line. Except, lines have a way of blurring when you're not paying attention. And so, the stage is set. Evelyn's life, once so predictable, so secure, is about to take a turn she never saw coming. What starts as a harmless flirtation will soon spiral into a web of secrets and lies, testing her marriage, her morals, and everything she thought she knew about herself. But for now, she's just Evelyn, a woman caught between the life she has and the one she thinks she might want. And as the story unfolds, we'll see how one seemingly innocent choice can change everything. The following Monday begins like any other day. Evelyn wakes up early, prepares breakfast, and kisses Mark goodbye as he heads out the door. On the surface, everything looks normal, but beneath her calm exterior, Evelyn feels a quiet storm brewing. She's been thinking about Ben all weekend, replaying their conversations and that lingering goodbye outside the bar. It's a distraction, she tells herself, a harmless little thrill to brighten her routine. But even as she pours her coffee and checks her emails, she can't help but glance at the clock, counting the minutes until she'll see him again. When Ben walks into the office that morning, Evelyn feels her pulse quicken. He's carrying a box of donuts for the team, his usual easygoing smile in place. "Morning, everyone," he says, setting the box on the break room counter. Evelyn catches his eye from across the room, and for a brief moment, it feels like they're the only two people there. "Don't tell me you baked these yourself," she jokes as she grabs a donut. "Guilty as charged," Ben replies with a grin. "I'm a man of many talents." Their banter is playful, almost innocent, almost. But Evelyn knows there's a line she's starting to tiptoe closer to, and she's not sure if she wants to stop. Later that week, the tension between Evelyn and Ben reaches a new level. It starts with small things, a lingering touch when he hands her a stack of papers, the way his gaze seems to linger just a second too long. And then there are the messages. It's Wednesday evening when Evelyn's phone buzzes with a text from Ben. "Can't stop thinking about Friday. Let's grab a drink again soon." Her heart skips a beat. She stares at the screen, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She knows she should say no, that anything more would be crossing a line, but instead, she types back, "I'd like that." That Friday, Evelyn finds herself back at the same bar. This time, it's just the two of them. She tells herself it's still harmless, just two coworkers having drinks after work. But as the evening goes on, the boundaries between professional and personal blur even further. They talk about everything, from childhood dreams to frustrations at work. Ben listens with an intensity that makes Evelyn feel seen in a way she hasn't in years. By the time they leave the bar, it's clear their connection has deepened. They part ways with a hug that lingers a little too long, and Evelyn spends the entire drive home wondering what she's doing. At home, Mark is waiting for her in the living room. "You're late," he says, his tone more curious than accusatory. "Lost track of time," Evelyn replies, her voice light. She doesn't mention Ben. Instead, she brushes past him, heading to the kitchen to pour herself a glass of water. But even as she goes through the motions of their nightly routine, she can't shake the guilt that's begun to creep in. Mark doesn't push for details, but there's a flicker of something in his expression. Uncertainty, maybe, or suspicion. For now, he lets it go. Over the next few weeks, Evelyn's relationship with Ben becomes more complicated. Their conversations grow more personal, their texts more frequent. She starts to make excuses to stay late at work, telling Mark she's catching up on projects when she's really meeting Ben for drinks or coffee. At the same time, she begins to notice the small ways her marriage is changing. Mark seems quieter, more withdrawn. He doesn't say anything outright, but Evelyn can sense that he knows something is off. One evening, as Evelyn is scrolling through her phone, Mark sits down beside her on the couch. "Is everything okay?" he asks, his voice gentle. Evelyn looks up, startled. "What do you mean?" "You've been distant lately. I just want to make sure we're okay." Her heart twists at the concern in his voice. For a moment, she considers telling him the truth, not about Ben, but about the way she's been feeling, about how she's been questioning everything. But the words stick in her throat, and instead she forces a smile. "Of course work's just been stressful." Mark nods, but his expression remains uncertain. Evelyn knows she's not fooling him, but she doesn't know how to fix it. The real turning point comes on a rainy Thursday evening. Evelyn and Ben are the last ones in the office, working late to finish a big project. The rain pounds against the windows, and the glow of their desk lamps feels almost intimate. "Thanks for staying late," Ben says as he leans back in his chair. "I know you probably had other plans." "It's fine," Evelyn replies, glancing at him. "I like working with you." The words hang in the air, heavier than she intended. Ben stands, walking over to her desk. "Evelyn," he says softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you ever think about us?" Her breath catches. For a moment, she doesn't know what to say, and then before she can stop herself, she nods. The kiss that follows is electric. It's the kind of kiss that makes her forget everything: her marriage, her guilt, her fears. In that moment, there's only Ben. But the euphoria doesn't last. As Evelyn drives home later that night, the weight of what she's done crashes down on her. She pictures Mark sitting in their living room, waiting for her with that quiet patience she's always taken for granted. She knows she's crossed a line she can never uncross, and for the first time she's forced to confront the consequences of her actions. This is where the real story begins. Evelyn's choices have set a chain of events into motion that will test her marriage, her morals, and her sense of self. The question isn't whether she'll be caught, it's what will happen when she is. And speaking of choices, let's take a moment to talk about yours. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring you more stories like this one, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. By now, Evelyn's life is a tightrope, swaying precariously between two worlds. On one side is the steady, familiar comfort of her marriage with Mark. On the other, the intoxicating allure of her secret affair with Ben. Every choice she makes feels like it could tip the balance, and the tension is almost unbearable. But the facade can only hold for so long. One chilly November evening, Evelyn and Mark attend a neighborhood dinner party, the kind of event they've been to dozens of times: warm smiles, polite conversation, and plenty of red wine. But tonight, Evelyn feels out of place. Mark chats easily with the hosts, his laugh echoing through the room, while Evelyn's mind is elsewhere, replaying her latest encounter with Ben. As the night goes on, Evelyn finds herself alone on the back patio, staring up at the stars. The cool air bites at her skin, but she barely notices. Her thoughts are interrupted when Mark steps outside, holding 2 glasses of wine. He hands her one, his expression softer than she's seen in weeks. "You've been quiet tonight," he says, his voice low. "Everything okay?" Evelyn hesitates, torn between the weight of her secrets and the man who's standing in front of her. "Just tired," she replies finally, forcing a small smile. Mark nods, but his eyes linger on her, searching for something he can't quite name. "You know," he says after a pause, "we haven't really been us lately. I miss you, Evie." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She looks away, her grip tightening around the wineglass. I miss you too, she whispers. And for the first time in a long time, she means it. The moment lingers in Evelyn's mind as the weeks go on. She starts to question everything. The choices she's made, the lies she's told, and the woman she's become. But even as her guilt grows, her connection with Ben deepens. They steal moments together in parking lots, exchange texts late into the night, and share whispers that make Evelyn feel alive in a way she can't explain. But secrets have a way of surfacing, and Evelyn's world is about to come crashing down. It happens on a Thursday evening, one of those unremarkable nights that turn out to be anything but. Evelyn is sitting in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone, when Mark walks in holding a piece of paper. His face is pale, his hands trembling slightly as he sets it on the counter. "What is this?" he asks, his voice tight. Evelyn's heart stops. She glances down at the paper, her stomach dropping when she sees what it is. A printout of a text exchange between her and Ben. She doesn't know how Mark found it, and she doesn't have time to ask. All she can do is stare at the incriminating words on the page, her mind racing. "Mark!" she starts, her voice cracking. "I can explain." "Can you?" Mark interrupts, his tone sharper than she's ever heard. "Because I don't think there's anything to explain, Evelyn. You've been lying to me." The weight of his words crushes her. She's spent weeks convincing herself that she was in control, that she could keep her two lives separate. But now, the truth is out, and there's no going back. The confrontation escalates quickly. Mark demands answers. How long has this been going on? Did she ever love him? Evelyn tries to explain, to justify, but every word she says only seems to make things worse. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she says finally, tears streaming down her face. I felt lost, Mark. I didn't know how to tell you." "And Ben?" Mark snaps. "Was he your solution, sneaking around behind my back?" His anger is palpable, but beneath it is something even more devastating. Heartbreak. Evelyn can see it in his eyes, hear it in his voice, and it cuts deeper than anything she's ever felt. "I'm sorry," she whispers, but the words feel hollow. How do you apologize for breaking someone's heart? Mark doesn't sleep in their bed that night. He takes the couch, leaving Evelyn alone in the room they once shared. She lies awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind a whirlwind of guilt, regret, and confusion. She doesn't know what the future holds, but she knows one thing for certain: her marriage will never be the same. The next morning, Mark is gone before Evelyn wakes up. She finds a note on the kitchen counter, written in his familiar handwriting. "I need some time. Don't call me." The finality of it leaves her breathless. Evelyn spends the day in a fog, going through the motions of work while her thoughts spiral. She wants to call Ben to tell him what's happened, but a part of her knows that won't fix anything. For the first time, she realizes the gravity of what she's done, not just to Mark, but to herself. Meanwhile, Mark retreats to his brother's house, seeking solace in the familiar. His emotions swing wildly between anger and sorrow, his mind replaying every moment of his marriage, searching for the signs he missed. He doesn't know if he can forgive Evelyn, but he knows he can't go back to the way things were. As the days turn into weeks, the tension between Evelyn and Mark remains unresolved. They live separate lives, speaking only when necessary. Their once warm home now a battleground of unspoken words and shattered trust. Evelyn tries to bridge the gap, but every attempt is met with cold indifference. And then, just when she thinks things can't get worse, she receives a text from Ben. "We need to talk." The meeting with Ben is tense and awkward. They sit across from each other in a quiet corner of a coffee shop, their usual chemistry replaced by a heavy silence. "I heard," Ben says finally, his voice low. "About Mark, I didn't mean for this to happen, Evelyn." Evelyn shakes her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "Neither did I." But even as they talk, it becomes clear that their relationship was built on a foundation of lies and escapism. Without the thrill of secrecy, their connection feels hollow. They part ways, both knowing it's the end. And so Evelyn is left to pick up the pieces of her life. She knows she's made mistakes, big ones, and she's not sure if she can ever make things right. But one thing is certain: The person she's become is not the person she wants to be. The stage is set for the climax of this gripping story. Will Evelyn and Mark find a way to rebuild what's been broken, or is their marriage beyond repair? Stay tuned for the next chapter, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. The air in Evelyn and Mark's house is thick with tension. Days have passed since their confrontation, and though Mark has returned, the silence between them is louder than any argument. Evelyn walks on eggshells, unsure of how to bridge the gap. Mark, meanwhile, is distant, throwing himself into work and spending long hours at the gym. It's clear he's avoiding her, and she can't blame him. But the unease in their home is nothing compared to what's coming. One evening, Evelyn decides she can't take the silence anymore. She finds Mark in the living room, flipping through TV channels with an expression as blank as the screen's glow. "Mark," she says softly, sitting on the edge of the couch, "we need to talk." Mark doesn't look at her. "Talk about what you've said everything already." "No," Evelyn replies, her voice trembling. "I haven't. I need to explain. I need to—" Mark cuts her off, his voice rising for the first time. "Explain, Evelyn. What is there to explain? You lied, you cheated. And now, what you want me to sit here and listen while you justify it?" Evelyn's heart pounds as she fights back tears. "I don't want to justify anything. I need you to know that I never stopped loving you." Mark finally looks at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and hurt. "If this is what love looks like, Evelyn, I don't want it." The words are like a dagger to her chest. For a moment, she considers walking away, letting him have the final word, but something in her refuses to give up. "I made a mistake," she says, her voice firmer now. "A terrible mistake. But we've been through so much together, Mark. Doesn't that count for anything?" Mark shakes his head, his jaw tightening. "It used to, but now I don't know." The confrontation leaves Evelyn reeling. She spends the night tossing and turning, her mind racing with memories of their life together, their first date, their wedding day, the little moments that once made their relationship feel unshakable. She knows she's destroyed something precious, but she can't let go of the hope that it might still be salvageable. The next day brings an unexpected twist. Evelyn receives a call from Claire, one of her closest friends. They haven't spoken much since the fallout, but Claire's tone is warm, almost hesitant. "Evelyn, I've been thinking about you," Claire says. "I know things have been rough lately, but have you thought about talking to someone like a counselor?" Evelyn hesitates. The idea of airing her dirty laundry to a stranger feels daunting, but at this point she's willing to try anything. "Maybe," she says finally. "I'll think about it." That evening, Evelyn brings up the idea to Mark. He's sitting at the dining table, scrolling through his phone, when she approaches cautiously. "Mark," she begins, "I know I'm the last person you want to hear from right now, but Claire suggested counseling for us." Mark looks up, his expression unreadable. "Counseling? You think that's going to fix this?" "I don't know," Evelyn admits. "But we owe it to ourselves to try, don't we?" For a long moment, Mark doesn't respond. Then, to her surprise, he nods. "Fine, but don't expect me to forgive you overnight." "I'm not," she says quickly. I want us to try." The first counseling session is awkward, to say the least. They sit in a small, warmly lit office across from a kind-eyed therapist named Dr. Williams. Evelyn feels exposed, like every word she says is being dissected. Mark, on the other hand, is stoic, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "I'm not here to fix anything," Mark says bluntly. "I just want to understand how we got here." Dr. Williams nods, her gaze steady. "That's a good place to start, Evelyn. Would you like to share your perspective?" Evelyn takes a deep breath, her hands trembling in her lap. "I don't know where to begin. I felt invisible, like we were living side by side, but not really together. And then Ben came along, and he made me feel—" She stops herself, glancing at Mark. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that I made a mistake, and I'm trying to fix it." Mark's jaw tightens, but he doesn't say anything. The sessions continue over the next few weeks. Slowly, painfully, they begin to unpack the years of unspoken resentment and unmet expectations that led them to this point. Mark admits that he's felt unappreciated, that Evelyn's focus on her career often made him feel like an afterthought. Evelyn, in turn, acknowledges that she struggled to communicate her needs, often bottling up her frustrations until they exploded in unhealthy ways. It's not easy, and there are moments when they both want to walk away. But for the first time in months, they're talking. Really talking. Just as it seems like they might be making progress, another bombshell drops. One evening, Mark's phone buzzes with a text message from an unknown number. Evelyn notices the tension in his face as he reads it, and her stomach sinks. "Who is it?" she asks, her voice cautious. Mark hesitates before handing her the phone. The message is short but damning. "You deserve better than her. Let me know if you want to talk." It's from Ben. Evelyn feels the blood drain from her face as she stares at the screen. "I didn't know," she whispers. "I haven't spoken to him in weeks." Mark shakes his head, his frustration boiling over. "This is what I mean, Evelyn. You say you're sorry, but your actions keep dragging us back into this mess." "I'll handle it," she promises, her voice shaky. "I'll tell him to leave us alone." But the damage is done. The fragile trust they've been rebuilding feels like it's slipping away again, and Evelyn doesn't know if they can recover this time. The next day, Evelyn meets with Ben to confront him. They sit in a quiet cafe, the air between them heavy with tension. "You had no right to text Mark," Evelyn says, her voice low but firm. "You've done enough damage." Ben leans back in his chair, his expression unapologetic. "I just wanted him to know the truth, that he deserves better." "And you think that's you?" Evelyn snaps. "This isn't your business anymore. Ben, stay out of it." As she walks away, she feels a strange sense of closure. Whatever she once felt for Ben is gone, replaced by a resolve to focus on what truly matters, her marriage. Back at home, Evelyn finds Mark sitting on the porch, staring out at the setting sun. She sits beside him, the silence between them less heavy than it's been in weeks. "I talked to Ben," she says quietly. "It's over completely." Mark doesn't respond right away. When he finally speaks, his voice is soft. "I want to believe you, Evelyn. I really do. But it's going to take time." "I know," she says, her voice steady. "And I'm willing to wait as long as it takes." As the tension reaches its peak, the story is on the cusp of its most critical moments. Will Evelyn and Mark find a way to truly heal, or are some wounds too deep to mend? Stay tuned for the next chapter, and remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. The days that follow Evelyn's confrontation with Ben are heavy with tension. While she's drawn a clear line between herself and the man who almost destroyed her marriage, the shadow of her actions still looms large over her, and Mark trust is a fragile thing, and Evelyn is painfully aware that she's standing on the thinnest of ice. Mark, meanwhile, is caught in a whirlwind of emotions. He wants to believe that Evelyn is sincere in her efforts to rebuild their relationship, but the pain of her betrayal still lingers. Every time she leaves the house, every glance at her phone fills him with an unease he can't shake. It's exhausting, and he's starting to wonder if forgiveness is even possible. One evening, as they sit in strained silence over dinner, Mark finally speaks. "Do you think we're fooling ourselves?" he asks, his voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn looks up, startled. "What do you mean?" "This," he says, gesturing vaguely between them. "Trying to fix something that might already be broken." The question hangs in the air like a storm cloud, and Evelyn feels her throat tighten. "I don't know," she admits, "but I'm willing to fight for us, Mark. Are you?" Mark doesn't answer right away. Instead, he stares down at his plate, his expression unreadable. When he finally looks up, there's a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. "I don't know if I have it in me." The conversation marks a turning point for both of them. Evelyn realizes that no amount of effort on her part will matter unless Mark is willing to meet her halfway. And Mark, for the first time, confronts the depth of his own anger and hurt. He begins to wonder if his refusal to forgive is more about punishing Evelyn than protecting himself. A few days later, Evelyn suggests they take a break from counseling and spend a weekend away from home. "Just the two of us," she says. "No distractions, no reminders of everything. Maybe it'll help us figure out where we stand." To her surprise, Mark agrees. They book a cabin in the mountains, a place far removed from the chaos of their lives. Evelyn hopes the change of scenery will give them a chance to reconnect, to remember why they fell in love in the first place. The cabin is cozy and picturesque, nestled among tall pines and overlooking a tranquil lake. At first, the silence between them is almost suffocating. Mark spends most of the first day hiking alone, while Evelyn sits by the fire, staring into the flames and wondering if she's made a mistake. But on the second evening, something shifts. They're sitting on the porch, watching the sunset over the water, when Mark speaks up. "Do you remember our first trip together?" he asks, his voice soft. Evelyn smiles faintly. "The beach house in Cape Cod. We spent half the trip arguing over where to eat." Mark chuckles, a sound that feels almost foreign after weeks of tension. "And then we ended up eating pizza every night." The memory sparks something between them, a reminder of the life they shared before everything fell apart. For the first time in weeks, the conversation flows easily, and Evelyn feels a glimmer of hope. That night, as they sit by the fire, Mark finally opens up. He talks about his hurt, his anger, and the fear that he'll never be able to trust Evelyn again. Evelyn listens, her heart breaking with every word, but she knows this is what they need. Honesty, no matter how painful. When he finishes, Evelyn takes a deep breath. "I can't undo what I did, Mark, but I can promise you this. I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of your trust, if you'll let me." Mark doesn't respond right away. Instead, he reaches out, taking her hand in his. It's a small gesture, but it feels monumental. For the first time, Evelyn feels like they might actually have a chance. The weekend away marks the beginning of a tentative reconciliation. When they return home, things aren't perfect, but there's a noticeable shift in their dynamic. They talk more, share small moments of affection, and even laugh together again. It's not the life they had before, but it's a start. But just as things seem to be improving, another challenge arises. One evening, Evelyn receives a call from Ben. She doesn't answer, but the voicemail he leaves sends a chill down her spine. "I thought you should know," Ben says, his tone measured but ominous. "If Mark's forgiven you, that's great, but I wouldn't count on this staying buried forever." The implication is clear. Ben still holds the power to destroy everything she's worked to rebuild. Evelyn wrestles with whether to tell Mark about the call. On one hand, she doesn't want to risk reopening old wounds, but on the other, she knows that keeping it a secret could backfire if Ben decides to act on his threat. In the end, she chooses honesty. That night, as they sit on the couch, she tells Mark about the voicemail. His reaction is a mix of anger and exhaustion. "Why can't he just leave us alone?" Mark mutters, rubbing his temples. "Because I let him into our lives," Evelyn says, her voice filled with regret. "But I promise you, Mark, I won't let him ruin this, not again." Mark's trust in Evelyn is put to the test once more, but this time, she's determined to prove that she's learned from her mistakes. She changes her phone number, blocks Ben on every platform, and makes it clear that he's no longer a part of her life. It's a difficult process, but it brings them closer together. For the first time, Mark begins to see that Evelyn is truly committed to rebuilding their marriage. As the story builds toward its climax, Evelyn and Mark are forced to confront the ultimate question: can love survive betrayal? Their journey has been painful, messy, and filled with doubt, but it's also revealed a resilience they didn't know they had. The road ahead won't be easy, but for the first time, they're facing it together. As the tension reaches its peak, the story is on the cusp of its final, most critical moments. Will Evelyn and Mark's efforts pay off, or will their past continue to haunt them? Stay tuned for the next chapter, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. As Evelyn and Mark take tentative steps toward rebuilding their relationship, the cracks in their foundation remain visible. Each gesture of affection, every shared moment, feels like walking a tightrope. Evelyn is acutely aware of how fragile their progress is, and Mark's guarded demeanor is a constant reminder of the weight of her betrayal. But the stakes are about to rise again. A few weeks after Evelyn changed her phone number, she receives an unexpected message at work. It's an email from an unknown sender, and the subject line sends a chill down her spine. Does Mark know everything? The email contains nothing but a screenshot, an old text exchange between Evelyn and Ben, full of flirtation and veiled promises. Evelyn's heart pounds as she stares at the screen, her mind racing. Who sent this and why now? She immediately deletes the email, but can't shake the gnawing fear that someone is trying to sabotage her efforts to move on. Evelyn decides not to tell Mark about the email. She convinces herself it's a one-off, a desperate move by Ben or some misguided attempt at revenge. But the tension eats away at her, and she becomes increasingly distracted at home. Mark notices, of course, and his suspicions begin to creep back in. "You've been quiet lately," he says one evening as they sit on the couch. "Is there something you're not telling me?" Evelyn hesitates, torn between her desire to protect Mark and her fear of undoing all the progress they've made. "It's just work," she says finally, forcing a smile. "A lot of deadlines." Mark nods, but his expression remains skeptical. Evelyn knows she's walking a dangerous line. The turning point comes during a neighborhood barbecue. It's the kind of event where everyone brings a dish, kids run around the yard, and the adults sip beer while discussing local gossip. Evelyn and Mark attend together, trying to present a united front. But the illusion shatters when Evelyn spots Ben on the other side of the yard. Her stomach drops. She had no idea he would be there. He's talking to a group of people, his laughter carrying over the crowd like a beacon of her worst fears. Mark notices her reaction and follows her gaze. "What's wrong?" he asks, his tone sharp. Evelyn's mind races. She tries to downplay it, but Mark's already piecing things together. "Is that—" he starts, his voice trailing off. Evelyn nods, her face pale. "I didn't know he'd be here." Mark's jaw tightens without another word. He walks away, heading straight for Ben. The confrontation is inevitable. Mark approaches Ben, his posture stiff with barely contained anger. "We need to talk," he says, his voice low but firm. Ben smirks, clearly unfazed. "About what, Evelyn? I thought you two were doing great." Mark's fists clench at his sides. "Stay away from her. Stay out of our lives." Ben shrugs, his expression infuriatingly casual. "Sure, but just so you know, not everyone's as good at keeping secrets as you might think." Mark doesn't respond. Instead, he turns on his heel and walks back toward Evelyn, his face a mask of frustration and hurt. Back at home, the fallout is immediate. Mark confronts Evelyn, demanding to know what Ben meant by keeping secrets. Evelyn finally breaks, confessing everything. The email, her decision not to tell Mark, and her lingering fears that Ben won't let them move on. Mark is livid. "How could you keep this from me?" he demands. "After everything, you're still hiding things?" "I didn't want to hurt you," Evelyn cries. "I thought I was protecting you." Mark shakes his head, his voice trembling with anger. "You're not protecting me, Evelyn. You're protecting yourself." The fight leaves them both drained. Mark spends the night at a friend's house, leaving Evelyn alone to wrestle with her guilt and the growing realization that she might lose him for good. The house feels unbearably empty, every shadow a reminder of the life they're struggling to save. Evelyn knows she needs to take control of the situation. The next day, she reaches out to a lawyer, determined to find a way to ensure Ben can't interfere in their lives anymore. She also schedules an emergency counseling session for herself and Mark, hoping it's not too late to salvage what's left of their marriage. When Mark returns home, he's quieter than usual. They sit across from each other at the kitchen table, the tension between them palpable. "I talked to a lawyer," Evelyn says, her voice steady. "And I've scheduled counseling. I know I've made mistakes, Mark, but I'm doing everything I can to fix them. Please, don't give up on us." Mark looks at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he sighs. "I don't want to give up, Evelyn, but you need to understand. Trust isn't something you can rebuild overnight." "I know," she says softly, "but I'm willing to fight for it for us." Mark nods, and for the first time in weeks, Evelyn feels a sliver of hope. The next counseling session is raw and emotional. They discuss the barbecue, the email, and the confrontation with Ben. Mark admits that he feels like he's constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop, while Evelyn shares her fears of losing him entirely. Dr. Williams guides them through the conversation, helping them navigate their emotions and find common ground. It's exhausting, but by the end of the session, They both feel a small sense of relief. It's not a resolution, but it's a step forward. As the story nears its climax, the stakes have never been higher. Evelyn and Mark are at a crossroads, their future hanging in the balance. Every decision, every conversation, feels like a make-or-break moment. They're fighting for their marriage, but the question remains, is love enough to overcome betrayal? The tension is at its peak, and the story is racing toward its final, most critical moments. Will Evelyn and Mark's efforts finally pay off, or will the ghosts of their past continue to haunt them? Stay tuned for the next chapter, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. The tension in Evelyn and Mark's home is palpable, like a storm waiting to break. They're trying, truly trying, but the weight of everything they've been through still hangs heavy in the air. The counseling sessions help, but every step forward feels precarious, as though one wrong move could send them tumbling back into the abyss. And then, the storm hits. It's a quiet Friday evening. Evelyn is in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, while Mark sits in the living room, half watching a baseball game. The mundane normalcy of it all feels almost comforting, until Evelyn's phone buzzes on the counter. She glances at the screen and freezes. It's another email from the same unknown sender. The subject line reads, "Still hiding something?" Evelyn's heart pounds as she opens the email. This time, it's a series of photos, pictures of her and Ben during their affair. Some are innocuous, like them sitting together at a cafe, but others are damning. One photo, in particular, shows them kissing in a parking lot. Her hands tremble as she closes the email, her mind racing. She knows she has to tell Mark, but the thought of reopening that wound feels unbearable. Mark notices her hesitation when she brings dinner to the table. "What's wrong?" he asks, his eyes narrowing. Evelyn hesitates, then decides there's no point in hiding it. She retrieves her phone and shows him the email. "I don't know who's sending these," she says, her voice shaking, "but I thought you should see it." Mark's expression darkens as he scrolls through the photos. When he finally sets the phone down, his hands are clenched into fists. "Why now?" he asks, his voice low. "Why can't they just leave us alone?" "I don't know," Evelyn whispers, "but I'll do whatever it takes to make this stop." Mark nods, but the hurt in his eyes is unmistakable. Evelyn can feel the fragile trust they've been rebuilding slipping through her fingers, and she doesn't know how to stop it. The next morning, Evelyn reaches out to the lawyer she consulted before she explains the situation and asks if there's any way to trace the sender of the emails. The lawyer promises to look into it but warns that it might take time. In the meantime, Evelyn decides to confront Ben directly. She drives to his apartment, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turn white. When he answers the door, his smirk is enough to send her blood boiling. "Evelyn," he says, leaning casually against the doorframe. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "You know why I'm here," she snaps. "The emails, the photos, it has to stop." Ben raises an eyebrow, feigning innocence. "Emails, photos. I have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't play games with me, Ben," Evelyn says, her voice sharp. "If you care about me at all, or if you ever did, you'll stop this." Ben's smirk fades, replaced by something darker. "You think this is me, Evelyn? I moved on a long time ago. If someone's trying to mess with you, it's not me." Evelyn doesn't know whether to believe him, but the uncertainty gnaws at her. If it's not Ben, then who is it? When Evelyn returns home, Mark is waiting for her. She tells him about her conversation with Ben, and while he's skeptical, he doesn't push the issue. Instead, they focus on what they can control, strengthening their relationship and preparing for whatever might come next. And then, the truth comes out. It's during one of their counseling sessions that the pieces finally fall into place. Dr. Williams encourages them to talk about their social circle, the friends and acquaintances who've been involved in their lives throughout this ordeal. As they list names, one stands out: Claire. Evelyn's stomach drops as she recalls a conversation with Claire months earlier, before everything spiraled out of control. Claire had expressed concern about Evelyn's growing closeness with Ben, even warning her to be careful. At the time, Evelyn brushed it off, But now it seems less like concern and more like suspicion. When Evelyn confronts Claire later that evening, her worst fears are confirmed. "Yes, I sent the emails," Claire admits, her voice trembling. "But it wasn't out of malice, Evelyn. I couldn't stand by and watch you destroy your life. I thought if Mark knew the full truth, it might force you to face what you'd done." Evelyn is stunned. She feels a mix of betrayal and guilt, unsure of how to respond. "You had no right," she says finally, her voice breaking. "No right to interfere like that." "I was trying to help," Claire insists. "But maybe I went too far." Evelyn leaves the conversation feeling more lost than ever. She knows she needs to tell Mark, but the thought of yet another betrayal feels like too much to bear. When Evelyn finally tells Mark the truth about Claire, his reaction surprises her. Instead of anger, he seems almost relieved. "At least now we know," he says. "And at least it wasn't Ben." Evelyn nods, her eyes welling with tears. "I'm sorry, Mark, for everything." Mark takes her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "We'll get through this, Evelyn, but it's going to take time." As the story builds toward its climax, Evelyn and Mark find themselves at a crossroads once again. They've faced betrayal, manipulation, and the weight of their shared history, but they're still standing. The question now is whether they can move forward together, or if the past will continue to hold them back. The tension is at its peak, and the story is racing toward its final resolution. Stay tuned for the next chapter, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. The fallout from Evelyn's revelation about Claire lingers between her and Mark. While they're relieved to have clarity, the knowledge that someone so close to them played a part in their unraveling leaves an emotional scar. Still, for the first time in weeks, there's a sense of solidarity, an understanding that they're in this together. But the hardest challenges are yet to come. Mark begins to withdraw again, this time not out of anger, but exhaustion. The constant turmoil, the endless cycle of revelations and confrontations, has left him emotionally drained. Evelyn notices the change and worries that he's nearing his breaking point. One night, as they lie in bed, she reaches for his hand. "Mark," she says softly, "are you okay?" He doesn't respond immediately. When he finally does, his voice is heavy. "I don't know, Evelyn. I want to believe we can get through this, but it's hard." "I know it is," she whispers, "but I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Mark squeezes her hand but doesn't say anything more. Evelyn lies awake long after he falls asleep, her mind racing with fears of what might come next. The next day, Evelyn receives a call from Claire. She almost ignores it, but decides at the last second to pick up. Claire's voice is tense, almost frantic. "Evelyn, I need to see you. It's important." Against her better judgment, Evelyn agrees to meet at a nearby park. When she arrives, Claire is already there, pacing near a bench. "I owe you an apology," Claire says as soon as Evelyn approaches. "I thought I was helping, but I see now that I just made things worse." Evelyn crosses her arms, her expression guarded. "Why did you do it, Claire? Was it really about helping, or was there something else?" Claire hesitates, then sighs. "Maybe a little of both. I was angry with you, Evelyn, angry that you were risking everything for someone like Ben, but I also thought Mark deserved to know the truth." "And look where that got us," Evelyn says bitterly. "If you wanted to help Claire, you should have come to me first." "I know," Claire says quietly. "And I'm sorry. I hope you can forgive me." Evelyn doesn't respond right away. Instead, she stares at the lake, her thoughts a whirlwind. Finally, she says, "I don't know if I can not yet." Claire nods, accepting the answer. "For what it's worth, I hope you and Mark can work things out. You deserve a second chance." The conversation with Claire leaves Evelyn feeling both relieved and unsettled. While it's clear that Claire regrets her actions, Evelyn can't help but wonder if their friendship can ever be repaired. For now, she chooses to focus on what truly matters, her marriage. That evening, Evelyn shares the conversation with Mark. To her surprise, he seems almost indifferent. "At least she's owning up to it," he says. "But honestly, Evelyn, I don't care about Claire right now. I care about us." Evelyn nods, her heart aching. "Me too." The tension comes to a head during their next counseling session. Dr. Williams asks them to talk about their hopes for the future, what they want their lives to look like if they manage to rebuild their relationship. "I want to trust Evelyn again," Mark says, his voice steady but pained. "I want to believe that we can get back to where we were before all of this." Evelyn's eyes well up with tears. "And I want to prove to Mark that I'm worthy of his trust. I want to be the person he fell in love with again." Dr. Williams nods, her expression thoughtful. "It's clear that you both want to move forward, but the path won't be easy. Trust takes time to rebuild, and forgiveness is a process. The question is, are you willing to put in the work?" Both Evelyn and Mark nod, their resolve evident. But they know the road ahead will be anything but smooth. Just as it seems like they might be turning a corner, another curveball is thrown their way. Mark receives a letter in the mail, a typed note with no return address. The message is brief, but chilling. Some things can't be forgiven. Mark shows the letter to Evelyn, his face pale. "Do you think this is Ben?" "I don't know," Evelyn says, her voice shaking. "But we need to find out." They take the letter to the lawyer, who promises to investigate further. In the meantime, the message serves as a stark reminder that their past still holds the power to disrupt their present. The strain begins to take its toll on Mark and Evelyn's day-to-day lives. Mark throws himself into work, spending long hours at the school and volunteering for extra duties. Evelyn does the same, taking on additional projects at her job in an attempt to distract herself from the mounting pressure. But the distance between them grows, and Evelyn knows they can't continue like this. One evening, she suggests a weekend getaway. Another chance to escape the chaos and focus on each other, Mark agrees, albeit reluctantly. The getaway is a mix of highs and lows. They spend their days hiking and exploring the nearby town, sharing moments of laughter and connection that feel almost like old times. But the nights are harder. The silence between them is heavy, and Evelyn can feel the weight of everything they're not saying. On the last night, as they sit by a fire pit, Mark finally speaks. "I want to believe we can make this work," he says, his voice barely above a whisper. "But sometimes I wonder if we're just prolonging the inevitable." Evelyn's heart sinks. "I don't want to give up on us, Mark. Not now. Not ever." Mark looks at her, his expression conflicted. "I don't either, but I don't know if love is enough." As the weekend ends, Evelyn and Mark return home with more questions than answers. They're at a tipping point, and both of them know that the decisions they make in the coming weeks will determine the fate of their relationship. The story is reaching its most critical moments, where the tension is at its peak and the stakes have never been higher. Will Evelyn and Mark find a way to rebuild their trust, or will their past prove too much to overcome? Stay tuned for the final chapter. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. Evelyn and Mark return from their weekend away, each carrying the weight of unspoken fears. Their journey together has been grueling, and the fractures in their relationship are undeniable. Yet, beneath the doubt and pain, there's a flicker of hope, a shared desire to heal, no matter how daunting the task may seem. But as they settle back into their routines, the question looms: is love truly enough to rebuild what's been broken? A breakthrough comes unexpectedly during a quiet evening at home. Evelyn is flipping through old photo albums, something she hasn't done in years. Mark finds her sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by memories of their life together. "Remember this?" she asks, holding up a photo of them on their honeymoon, laughing as they pose in front of a rickety old boat. Mark smiles faintly, sitting down beside her. "That boat looked like it was going to sink any second. And yet, we still got on it," Evelyn says, her voice soft. "We didn't care about the risks, we just wanted to be together." Mark's smile fades, replaced by a thoughtful expression. "We used to be fearless," he murmurs. "Somewhere along the way, we lost that." Evelyn places a hand on his. "Maybe we can find it again." The conversation sparks a new resolve in both of them. They decide to focus on the small things, the everyday gestures that once made their relationship strong. Evelyn starts leaving Mark little notes in his lunchbox, reminders of why she loves him. Mark, in turn, begins surprising her with small acts of kindness, like making her favorite tea or planning a date night. It's not a grand gesture or an immediate fix, but it's a start, As they rebuild their connection, the final loose ends begin to tie themselves up. The lawyer traces the anonymous emails and letter back to a former coworker of Evelyn's, someone who had witnessed her and Ben's relationship and decided to stir up trouble out of spite. The revelation brings relief, but also reinforces the fragility of their situation. Evelyn apologizes again for the pain her actions caused, and Mark acknowledges that forgiveness is a process, not a destination. "I'm trying," he tells her one evening. "I just need you to keep trying too." "I will," Evelyn promises, "every day." The real turning point comes during their final counseling session. Dr. Williams asks them to reflect on the journey they've been through and what they've learned. "I've learned that love isn't just a feeling," Evelyn says. "It's a choice, and I choose to love Mark, even when it's hard." Mark nods, his voice steady but emotional. "I've learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about deciding that the past doesn't define our future." Dr. Williams smiles. "It sounds like you both have come a long way. Remember, the road ahead won't always be easy, but it's clear you're both committed to walking it together." In the weeks that follow, life begins to feel normal again. Or at least, a new kind of normal. Evelyn and Mark fall into a rhythm. One that's different from the life they had before, but no less meaningful. They rediscover the joy of simply being together. Whether it's cooking dinner, watching a movie, or taking long walks in the evening. Their love isn't perfect, but it's real. And for the first time in a long time, they both feel at peace. The story ends on a quiet, hopeful note. Evelyn and Mark sit on their porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. They don't say much. There's no need to. The silence between them is no longer heavy with unspoken words, but filled with the quiet comfort of two people who have weathered the storm and come out stronger. Evelyn leans her head on Mark's shoulder, a small smile playing on her lips. "Thank you for not giving up on us," she whispers. Mark wraps an arm around her, pulling her close. "Thank you for fighting for us." As the first stars begin to appear in the sky, Evelyn closes her eyes, feeling a sense of gratitude she hasn't felt in years. Their journey hasn't been easy, but it's brought them to a place of understanding, resilience, and a renewed sense of love. And so, the story of Evelyn and Mark concludes, not with a grand dramatic resolution, but with a quiet, powerful reminder that even the most broken things can be mended with patience, effort, and a willingness to try. Thank you for watching this recap of Evelyn and Mark's incredible journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more captivating stories like this one. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video.